So I read this recently somewhere. It said that I prefer reading the newspaper from the back to the front because that way the world goes on from being real to fake. Because the news that we consume nowadays is mostly fabricated and has very little or nothing to do with the actual truth. But is there an absolute truth? Is my truth different than your truth? Let's find out in today's episode of Perfectly Average. So let's just define truth first of all. According to Wikipedia, it says that truth is the property of being in accord with fact or reality. So, to understand what truth means, we have to understand what fact and reality means. Simply put, fact is a theory that everyone agrees on, and reality, well, it's subjective. There is no one true reality. Your reality might be different from my reality because our reality is just based on our thoughts and our beliefs. So, even the definition of truth is a bit ambiguous. So, for simplicity, let's just divide truth into two categories, absolute and relative. So, absolute truth is the theory that we all believe in, we mutually agree on. So, like 2 plus 2 equal to 4, no problems there. But the real problem lies within the relative truth concept. It is the truth that we choose to believe based on our ideologies, beliefs, and past experiences. So, we're not going to discuss any philosophical aspects of the truth. You can read about that if you want to on the expansive Wikipedia page for the truth. But we're going to discuss how and why truth affects your daily life in more ways than you actually care to understand. How a better understanding of the truth can actually change your life for the better. So, how can truth be relative? As in, how can one thing, a fact, be interpreted by different people differently? Because of the same thing that guides most of our lives, bias. Biases are the cornerstone of our personalities. They guide our decision making and the beliefs that we have. Biases are formed very early in your age from the education that you've gotten and the experiences that you had. And you use those biases to make decisions in later years of your life that further strengthen your belief in that bias. So, the bias that is most responsible for our inclination towards one truth or the other is called the selective attention theory. Now, this selective attention theory is a result or a conclusion of a psychological test called the Stroop effect test. So, the Stroop test is a very simple psychological test wherein the participant has to take two sets of tests. The test is simply to read out the words aloud. So the first set of the test is where the words that have been given are the names of colors like red, orange, blue, etc. But so that's very easy to for the participant. That time is noted down. Then the second part of the test is where the participant has to say the color of the font of the word instead of the word itself. So like the words are red, yellow, and orange, but the word red is written in blue ink, the word yellow is written in green ink, and the word orange is written in brown ink. So the person has to say blue, green, and brown instead of red, yellow, orange. You get the point, right? So in this case, the person, you might have done this in some place because in colleges we used to do that. So uh, this is a little difficult for the participant, and when the time is noted, it is a considerable more amount of time than the earlier test. So when the times are compared, it is evident that the second test was much harder and the participants didn't do as good as the first test. So why is that? Why do we take so much more time in the second test? Well, it's because of selective attention. Simply to explain that when you read a word that says red, but the word red is written in blue ink, your eyes see red and they send a signal to your brain saying that the word red is written, and because you're more accustomed to reading the words out loud instead of their colors, that's why you take much more time to process the color of the word instead of the word itself. So basically, in conclusion of this test, it's just to understand that we are more inclined and we find it more easy to do stuff that follows our basic understanding, and we find it difficult to do or understand stuff that is different from the natural way of you doing it. So this is what the selective attention theory is all about. It basically means that we tend to follow and understand stuff that we already have an understanding of, or we have already established some beliefs about that, and we prefer to understand stuff that we already have an inclination towards rather than stuff that does not match or fit into the understanding that we have of the world. So, a very popular example of this selective attention theory is the relation between vaccination and autism. So, a lot of studies were conducted to understand if there is a relation between getting children vaccinated and the number of cases of autistic children. So, most studies, I don't have an empirical number, but most studies stated that there was no correlation whatsoever. But a few, like a couple of theories that were theories and studies, ungoverned, most of them, claimed that there is a correlation between vaccination and autism. And because of those studies, a lot of parents in US decided not to get their children vaccinated, and they basically fell into this trap of selective attention because they fed into their pre-existing beliefs of that vaccination causes autism, and hence they did not read about the plethora of information that said that there is no relation between vaccination and autism, but decided that the two studies that said that it was true, and they decided to go with that. So, selective attention is one reason for us to believe in our own truths instead of a fact. The other reason, and the more prevalent one, is called cognitive dissonance. Now, cognitive dissonance is a really cool concept, and I first read about this in a book called 1984. It's by George Orwell. It's a very popular book. The book talks about a concept called doublethink. Doublethink basically means that a person believes in two contradictory things at the same time, and cognitive dissonance is exactly the same. So, a very simple example of understanding how cognitive dissonance works is by taking the example of smokers. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but still. Now, every smoker in this world knows two fundamental things. One, that smoking is the leading cause for lung cancer. Two, that cancer is fatal. Now, if you put two and two together, you would understand that smoking can basically kill you. Now, if you don't love your life, that's okay. Then your smoking is totally justified. But if you do, then there is no reason for you to smoke. But some people, and in fact most people, decide to keep smoking. And therein lies the dissonance. On the one hand, you know the truth about smoking. On the other hand, you continue to do it. Some of you might be thinking that, well, smokers don't think of the long-term effects while they're smoking. They're just smoking to reduce their anxiety or whatever. But that is exactly the reason or justification for any sort of dissonance behavior. Like, people would like to see their cities clean, but they litter when they travel. People would like everybody else to be truthful, but they lie. People would like everything to be fair, but they steal. And whenever they do any unethical thing, they just mark it as a one-time thing and say that it does not make them a bad person. And this dissonance is the root cause for every sort of truth that we believe in. That truth is affected and fabricated by these biases and this dissonance that we have in our brains. Another thing worth mentioning is that it doesn't just apply to relative truths like beliefs and thoughts, but it applies to fundamental truths as well. Like, for example, flat earth theory. Flat earth theory is the most ridiculous theory that has ever existed. Even after years of experience and years of proof, people still believe that earth is flat because the Bible says so. Another ridiculous thing that people believe is that global warming is not real. It's a hoax. The President of the United States says that it's not a thing. If he can say and believe this, you see how powerful this relative truth is. COVID-19, this pandemic, people don't believe there is a pandemic going on and they're running around the streets without any masks or protection and getting other people ill. If people are disregarding such fundamental truths because of their beliefs, then there is no chance for smaller truths and unimportant truths to survive in this world. So, coming back to the first thing that we discussed in today's episode, news. News loves sensationalism, they thrive on it. I will give you an example about how news functions. Alright, so during my college days, I was participating in an MUN. So, for those of you that don't know, MUN is a mock representation of the United Nations. So, I was doing some research when I came across an article that said something like, I don't really remember. It said that David Headley was arrested with 50,000 rupees cash. To get some more details about the incident, I went on another website and it said that David Headley was arrested with 50,000 rupees cash and 2 AK-47s. For further details, I went on another website and it said that David Headley was arrested with 75,000 rupees cash, 4 AK-47 and 2 RDX. So that day I understood that how truth is tampered to sell more copies. So I'm not saying that every truth is fabricated and you shouldn't consume any of it. It's just that you should consume everything with a pinch of salt. You should apply your own understanding and always cross-check it with other media. Analyze, understand, and then make that theory a fact, at least in your head. Even this advice you should take with a pinch of salt. But of course, at the end, it's your choice to make. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.